Today's video is brought to you by Cars and Bids, my online enthusiast car auction site that recently sold this, and this, and this, and this, and this. This is Doug DeMuro, and today I am in a new location with worse lighting, but the same great opinions. Ha! Sort of. Today we are going to do a market report. I'm going to tell you what I am seeing out there in the enthusiast car market in terms of values, prices, the future. It's been a long time since I've done a market report, so let's see what's going on. Okay, the state of the enthusiast car market is the sky is falling, everything is terrible. No, that's actually not true. It is what I was kind of expecting. When the Federal Reserve started its interest rate increasing campaign, I really thought that that would really put an end to a lot of the car speculation, a lot of the frenzied enthusiast car buying, and it did in large part. 2020, 2021, and the start of 22, things were crazy. Things are no longer crazy, but cars are still selling. We still have a great sale rate on Cars and Bids, always hovering around 85%. People are still buying cars, people are still selling cars, and more importantly, transactions are generally flat. So over the last couple of years, we've seen crazy growth in a lot of cars and values and areas, and some cars have gone stratospheric in their prices and become unobtainium, and that has generally stopped. I'm going to give you an exception at near the end of this video, but that has generally stopped. Now, again, this is a bit of a surprise to me because I thought things would be declining, but they haven't really declined significantly. Some cars have declined, but mostly, as a general rule, the market has just been flat. I think people are taking sort of a wait and see kind of approach, like, you know, I don't know if I need to be paying crazy money for X car or Y car, maybe I just won't buy that car, whatever, and so things have generally been flat. Now, with that said, some cars are dropping, and I'm going to start with those first. Finally, air-cooled Porsches are taking a dip. This is the dip that everybody's been predicting for the last 8 years as air-cooled Porsche values have run up. Well, they started down here, they ran up to here, and now they've dipped back down to here. So everybody who's like, oh, I knew they would fall at some point. Well, they have fallen from their peak, but there's still a 88 911 is never going to be the $20,000 car that it was when I was 16 and when these market prices started to absolutely go crazy. That stuff is done, but I have noticed a lot more no sales on air-cooled Porsches, a lot less when they do sell, transaction prices lower. I think 993 turbos, 88 G cars, the impact bumper, a lot of those cars, people finally are like, okay, things got really crazy, and there's some pullback in that market. That is clearly happening. And some other cars that had big runs are also starting to drop a little bit. I've noticed that BMW M coupes, the Z3 M coupes that are so crazy and so cool, everybody loves them, especially the S54 ones. They had a crazy run up. People were talking they'd be $100, $150, $200,000 cars. That never really happened, and now they have started to decline a little bit. Vipers, another one. Everybody for years has been talking about Vipers, especially the Gen 1 Viper and the Gen 2. Are undervalued. I've talked about it. I still think it. And they finally looked like they were having their moment in the sun, where Gen 2 Vipers were going from 30 to 40,000 to 50 to 60,000, and it was like, okay, this is it. Vipers are going to start getting crazy. And that didn't really happen. They did get up to 50, 60, 70,000 for some of those nice Gen 2s, and they kind of have dropped a little bit. And the Viper world has been a lot softer. And this is also true of the very late model Vipers that were selling for crazy money. That market has slowed down a lot too. So some drops in cars like that. But generally speaking, the market has been flat. And one interesting thing where I really expected we would see a huge decline was Overlanders. I thought the 4Runners, the modded big tire 4Runners and Tacomas and all those things would really start to drop off once COVID restrictions eased and people were able to get on airplanes and travel once again. That didn't really happen. A lot of the overlanding world really blew up during COVID because people were able to, go travel somewhere and still socially distance and be out in the wilderness and there's no risk. And so a lot of people did that stuff and they could work from anywhere. And so it really blew up the van life thing, the off-road sprinters. But it hasn't dropped. Like, we are still selling on Cars and Bids, Sprinters, 4Runners, all that stuff for real money that basically we were still getting in 21 and 22. Now, again, these cars haven't gone crazy as much as they had been. I don't think that 4Runners are still 10 or 20 grand over sticker at dealerships as new cars anymore. I think a lot of stuff has slowed down. Sequoias, you can tell, have already started to decline. The new Tundra, and those cars are kind of bellwethers for how the market is gonna go. But there's no question that overlanders are still hot, even despite travel being back, even despite a lot of people being back in offices working. People are still buying the 4Runners and vehicles like that. One interesting car that I was surprised didn't last very long in terms of speculators was the new GT4 RS, the Cayman GT4 RS. Those cars are still trading well above sticker, but given the hype and excitement around that car, and given the limited production of that car, I thought they would be 100,000 over sticker for the rest of their lives. Like, they were just, sticker was here, they'd be here, and they would never really come down. Sort of like GT4s, honestly, 981 GT4s. That has not happened with GT4 RSs, and in fact 981 GT4s are starting to slow as well. And I think some of the crazy fervor, speculation, excitement around Porsches is finally starting to slow down to an extent. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think a lot of the people who are in the Porsche world are maybe some of the people who are more affected by the interest rate increases, by tech layoffs, that kind of thing. I think that sector really gravitated towards some of these, especially really flashy GT3 RS, GT4 RS type Porsches. I think also that Porsche has just done a great job of making more cars and curbing speculation. You know, the GT4 RS comes out and everybody's like, this is the ultimate. And then they come out with a Spider version, the RS, and it's like, okay, this is the ultimate. Now there's speculation. Will there be a manual? They're coming out with all these new versions that are kind of forcing you to buy the car because you enjoy it, because you might not actually make a ton of money on it when you sell it. And that, I think if you asked Porsche, they would say that's our goal. We don't want to be known as the brand people buy the cars just to make money on investing in them. We want to make cars for people who want to use them. And I think over the last 5 years, you've seen a lot of people buying Porsches, flipping Porsches, cars with no miles transacting, with plastic still on seats. And I think Porsche is desperate to get into a situation where they can actually have enthusiasts buying their cars again, rather than people who freak out over the spec and then try to sell it for 100 grand over what they pay for. And I think Porsche's finally getting that by coming out with all these different versions and sort of tamping down speculation. And the GT4 RS is a good example of that. Now, in terms of cars that have leveled off, those are the cars that have dropped. But in terms of the level, like I said earlier, in general, the market has leveled. And so that refers to a lot of cars. Land Cruisers, flat after a big run up. S2000s were having a big run. You know, they were here and then they kind of dropped off as used cars, and then people got into them again and they went back up. They're level now. And you're seeing a lot of, S2000 speculators wondering why they're not getting crazy money for, their low mileage AP2. Well, it's just not, the fervor isn't there as much anymore. And this is true for a lot of stuff. In my world, I have a NAS Land Rover Defender that's leveled off. Ford GT is absolutely leveled off after a nice climb over the last 5 years. Ferrari 550 and 575, Acura Integra Type R, those were both kind of bellwethers for the enthusiast market climbing. Those have both kind of stayed flat over the last 6 months or a year. So I think what you're seeing is no more crazy rises in value, which is great for enthusiasts, but there's also a bit of a drawback, which is some of these cars are not going to go back to their prices that they were at. In fact, I think most of these cars are not going to go back. If you were looking for a Ferrari 550 for 100 grand or an Integra Type R for 25, where you could get them sort of pre-pandemic, maybe a few years before that, they're not returning to those levels. It doesn't seem like they're really falling. We have kind of a steep climb. Some cars have dropped a little, but now they're sort of staying here. And so if you were one of those people who's like, I'm gonna wait on a S2000 until they come back down, you're gonna be waiting forever. And I mentioned earlier, there are very few cars that are rising in value right now, but some still are. There is one segment in particular I have noticed that is still absolutely stratospherically climbing in value, and that is modern exotic cars. Now, I didn't go to the Monterey Car Week this year, but I did eagerly and excitedly watch all the auctions of the really high dollar stuff, the $1, $2, $3, $5, $10 million cars, like at RM, where they had a Jaguar XKSS and other stuff. And one thing I noticed while watching these auctions, some of which I watched live on YouTube from my front porch on the East Coast, was that the old stuff was very hard to sell. Bidding was slow. Bidding was having trouble getting to pre-sale estimates. In a lot of cases, I suspect that consigners of some of these old, the Duesenbergs and the Fiats from the 50s and the Alphas, I feel that in some cases it looked like the consigners were probably cutting their reserves, just saying, let's sell it, this is our best chance, you know, that kind of thing. And I have a suspicion that the old stuff, I don't want to say it's dropping. I don't think that like some of my colleagues do. I think that the old stuff does still have a lot of interest, and I'm surprised by that, but I think it too has flattened. But the modern exotic stuff was absolutely flying off the shelves. I got a Carrera GT. As you all know, there was a huge result at RM for a Carrera GT. Ferrari F40 was doing incredibly well. Porsche 959 is absolutely going to the moon. These were not that valuable 5 or 6 years ago, and by that I mean $500,000 to $700,000, a lot of money. But for a one of 272 or whatever it is Porsche, that's not all that much money when you really think about how rare that is. You know, they made 1,300 Carrera GTs, and those have generally in the last 5 years been more valuable than 959s. Well, now 959s are having their day. The Lamborghini Countach has experienced a huge rise recently, and in fact, generally speaking, older Lambos have. Diablos had been kind of maligned as the redheaded stepchild of the supercar Lambos. That has changed. They are hot right now. Countaches are flying up. It seems like every Countach result is higher than the previous one. Lamborghini Murcielagos are going up. You know, Lamborghini only made about 2,000 Countaches. They made about 3,000 Diablos and about 4,000 Murcielagos, and then they made about 11,000 Aventadors. So the Murcielago is more in the old school rare special realm than some of the newer stuff, and values are starting to climb accordingly. Lexus LFA remains incredibly strong, despite me believing they're not really worth it. The market doesn't agree with me. They are strong, values are strong, and people are still paying for them. And I think what we're seeing here is young people who have money are still putting it into these special cars from their childhood bedroom posters. And I think that a lot of younger people are also maybe a little concerned. They've watched F40s get out of their price range, and they're thinking, if I don't buy this Carrera GT now, it's going to cost $2.5 million in 5 years. Now, I don't necessarily think that is likely, that these prices will continue to climb at a crazy level, but if there's any segment where they are, it is these modern exotics, the 80s and up exotic cars, where there seems to be kind of an unabated interest in continuing to buy, even as the rest of the market has kind of flattened and slowed down. And especially with older Lamborghinis, I've really noticed it, but the other stuff too, 959, F40s are doing incredibly well. A lot of good cars transacted for good money in the $1 to $4 million range. And Enzo had a great result at one of the Monterey auctions. Like, these are the cars, and when I say young people, people from 30 to 50 who don't want the Duesenbergs, don't want the old Alphas, but still want these poster cars, they're still going out and getting them, and they're still paying money. And apparently these people still do have money to spend. So there you go. There is a market report on the current state of the enthusiast car market. Some stuff is dropping, some stuff that we all could have predicted would drop after a quick rise, like air-cooled 911s and Vipers. Most stuff is just sort of staying flat. Your S2000s, your Defenders, that kind of thing, just flat. No drop like some people were hoping for, but no more rise either. But I am seeing the one segment that's going up is those modern exotic cars. And I'm not sure if that will continue, but it doesn't seem like there's a clear end in sight as people keep going after those cars and pursuing them for collections or to drive or whatever. So that is my market report. Thanks for watching.